Jim, of course, because let's get back to sort of the virus response and the government's response, which has certainly come under some criticism as well, but also criticizing some U.S. companies. Chief amongst them, well, President Trump yesterday, late in the day, slamming 3M after invoking the Defense Production Act to get the company to produce more respirators, more of the face mask, the N95 mask. The president tweeting last night, quote, "We hit 3M hard today after seeing what they were doing with their masks. P-Act all the way. Big surprise to many in government as to what they were doing will have a big price to pay." Well, joining us now to respond to the president is the company's chairman and CEO, Mike Roman, of course, of 3M. Mike, good to have you with us again. And let me let you respond if you can. Please respond to the tweet itself and to what you thought when you read that and heard that and what you have to say.
Yeah, David, let me say this. The idea that 3M is not doing all it can to fight price gouging and unauthorized reselling is absurd. The narrative that we are not doing everything we can to maximize delivery of respirators in our home country, nothing could be further from the truth. We are doing everything we can to maximize our efforts and to fight COVID-19 and to support the healthcare workers here at home in the U.S.
And so what is going on here that they needed to invoke the Defense Production Act? I know you ship to Canada. I know you ship to Latin America. I know you are shipping from your manufacturing now in China and have vastly increased production from what was 16 million to as many as 32 million now. But why did the administration need to do this?
Well, David, we are doing everything. We have increased our production, as you said, by millions and millions, and we are bringing more respirators in from China. We are net importing into the U.S., and we've been telling the administration for days and days. And it's important, David, that you understand we're more than happy to shift our overseas production to the U.S., but there are going to be consequences on a humanitarian level as we are the sole and often the sole provider of those respirators in countries around the world where we put manufacturing to support them in just this kind of circumstance. We will comply with DPA, and we are taking steps to increase our import where we have that ability. As the COVID-19 outbreak in China has subsided, we've been able to work to prioritize and allocate more products, get approval to bring product from China into the U.S., and we have 10 million now starting to ship, 10 million on a monthly level, starting to ship this week. And we're looking to expand from there. And we're anxious to work with the administration to do just that. In the meantime, we will comply with the Defense Production Act, and we will continue to expand our capacity and manufacturing in the U.S. as we have laid out. And we're going to double again what we're producing in the U.S.
But you do indicate in your statement, Mike, that in fact this policy could end up hurting us. You say if you ceased all exports of respirators produced in the U.S. would likely cause other countries to retaliate and do the same. Some have already done that. And if that were to occur, the net number of respirators being made available to the U.S. would actually decrease. Do you really think that's a real possibility?
Well, here's kind of how it lays out. We have a small portion of our respirator production in the U.S. that goes to Canada and Latin America. It's been a long-standing commitment to the healthcare workers in those countries, and we are the primary supply for them. And we are net importing with what we're bringing in from China. The idea of bringing all of our production back overseas, we've already seen export restrictions out of the EU, export restrictions out of Asian countries, and that has been the response to even the idea that PPE could leave their country. So it is something to consider. I think that's where the help of the administration can be critical to help us, avoid that and to help move forward the right way. And then there's just the consequence on a humanitarian level, because we are the sole provider in many cases of the respiratory protection for healthcare workers in countries around the world.
Well, then, Mike, is the administration not being honest about what really went on here in terms of provisioning respirators and perhaps just trying to cover up their own inadequacies and properly preparing the country for this pandemic?
Well, I think I laid it out for you. How the narrative was presented, and overnight the narrative that is kind of propagated broadly and the focus there, it's just not true. We are doing everything. The employees of 3M around the world are working around the clock, and in the United States to deliver and continue this increase. We saw this in January. We decided to double our production in January, long before anyone had called for a big step up in the United States. We engaged with the administration at the end of February and gave them very transparent about what we produce everywhere around the world, including the U.S., and with our plans. And we've been in constant discussions with them about how to best work with them, and we will continue to do that. We're working with FEMA right now very effectively to prioritize where our products go. So the narrative that we aren't doing everything we can as a company is just not true.
Mike, Jim, how you been?
I'm doing well, Jim.
All right, you hang in there. Listen, there's an impression from the president's tweet that you, let's just say that they wanted you to do something for a long time. When were you first aware that, or spoke to someone in the White House that you were ready to give them the mask?
We had our first engagement at the end of February.
No, Feb 16, wasn't it?
I think that was the first outreach. By the last week of February, we had pulled together all the information that they were asking for and had delivered that, and that opened a pretty transparent relationship. And we had Vice President Pence visit us on March 5th at our headquarters here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and we had a great discussion. We at that point, the emergency use authorization had been declared by the FDA, which was a big step in allowing us to bring the industrial respirators into healthcare. Prior to that, they were not allowed to be sold into healthcare. And so we redirected all of our production of industrial respirators into healthcare, prioritized it, even ahead of the PrEP Act amendment. There's been some narrative that we waited until the final PrEP Act amendment approval. That's not true either. We stepped into it as soon as we saw the emergency use authorization. We started shipping product to our healthcare customers. We were hearing the outcry at that point and needed that EUA, that emergency use authorization, to really pave the way for us to bring a large volume. Our normal healthcare volume is only about 10% of our production around the world, including in the U.S.
Okay,
now it's
I want to be very
everything.
clear about this. When the White House called you in mid-February, did you say that you had other commitments and you could not help the United States? Because I watched a program last night on another network that basically questioned your patriotism, said that you would sell out the United States and its first responders. But if you agreed in mid to late February to help the president, I don't know how you're viewed as a sellout.
Yeah, Jim, until the COVID-19 outbreak became really front and center in the United States, our demand in our respirators in the U.S. was largely industrial. And so we were selling, this is kind of how it works. And this gets to the price gouging and the resellers. We manufacture respirators, we sell them to distributors, they sell them to end users. Until that COVID-19 outbreak, the distributors sold it to anybody broadly.
Right.
As soon as the pandemic came in, we worked with distribution and told them where they needed to prioritize healthcare. So up until the end of February, or until really that emergency use authorization, we were selling some respirators broadly to non-healthcare applications. So it really was that changeover in early March.
Okay, now, the president's tweet says P-Act all the way. Is that Patriot Act, or is that PFAS, which is your problem with groundwater, which the Justice Department is not currently on? But if the Justice Department decided to go after you at the advice of the president, they could make your company's life miserable. Which is, what is P-Act?
Yeah, I wasn't clear, Jim. I took it at either the PrEP Act or the DPA. My view is it was what we've been talking about since yesterday is the implementation, the order for the Defense Production Act, and that's been front and center in, as I said, and we will comply. We're working with the administration to look at how best to do that. We're also working with the administration to find ways to increase the import of respirators, more from China. We are bringing 10 million in, but we produce more than that in China, and we'd like to work to expand that.
Hey, Mike, it's Carl. Two really quick questions. One is, when do you forecast supply-demand balance on respirators in this country, at least for healthcare? I mean, is there a date that you have in mind? And more broadly, to Jim's question, I mean, the criticism is going to come not just from the administration, but from the public at large, that after being celebrated for so long for being global, you're not American enough now. What's the answer to that?
Well, just when you look at the balance, the increase in capacity that we've laid out, we are at 35 million respirators a month in the U.S., plus the 10 million coming in from China. We are expecting to add about 5 million to that as we get through April. We'll add another 10 million a month as we get through June. And then we're fast-track investments, and we have great support from suppliers and from governments as well to make sure we get this as fast as possible. We'll bring more online late this year. So we'll double our production in the U.S. again by the end of the year. That's what it's going to take to get in balance. I think near term, we have more demand than we have production capacity, and we're not alone. We are only one company providing respirators into the solution set, but it is very high demand right now. That's why it's important that we are working every way to increase capacity, bring more products in where we can, and think longer term. There's a large order from the government, which we replied to and have an award coming for longer term production of respirators, and we are investing in capital to bring that capacity online as we go into next year even. So it's a number of steps, and for us, Carl, it's about doing everything we can near term, because that's where the need is urgent. April, the month of April. What can we do to maximize everything we do in April?
Yeah, Mike, it's David again. And, there is obviously a concern as well, though, about price gouging. There is a broad desire on the part of many Americans to have face masks at this point. In fact, we've even seen the CDC recommend it in some way. What do you say to those who are now looking at a box of 20 respirators that costs as much as $500, which is far above what its previous cost had been? And who's responsible for that?
Yeah, it's unethical and it's despicable. And, as I laid it out, we sell through distributors. Since the pandemic came on and we've been selling everything into healthcare, we are working with highly reputable distributors, and we have everyday conversations, making sure we know where those products are going. We have not and would never raise prices ourselves. Our distributors, we're holding them accountable, and we will take action if we see any issues with them. The real issue in the marketplace are those resellers that have collected inventory maybe back in January and February or other parts of the world, and they are now on the market reselling them, and we're fighting that. We're working with the Department of Justice and with the state attorney general. We are identifying resellers that we know are either a counterfeit or price gouging activities. We are all in on this, and we've been doing this since we redirected our focus on healthcare, and we saw this emerging as a big issue. So it is something we're all in on. The narrative that we aren't paying attention to this or we aren't acting is just not true. They're not informed, or they don't care to understand the facts.
Right. And finally, Mike, longer term, it's not hard to imagine a world in which people want to wear face masks of some fashion for years to come, potentially. Is that your plan or thought, that that's the way the world's going to go? And do you see yourself having increased capacity in terms of production for years to come?
Well, David, we have had a strategy since SARS that we keep idle capacity available for these kinds of events. We knew they were going to come again, H1N1, swine flu. So we've had idle capacity that enabled us to double from our normal run rate in industrial and healthcare demand. And now we have made investments to double again. So we're already at 1.1 billion respirators worldwide per year that we're producing. We're going to go to 2 billion as we come out of this year. And we're working with the Department of Defense and others in the administration to really understand what more we need to do to deliver on the changes that are coming, including increasing stockpiles, not just in governments, but in healthcare providers as well. So there's a lot of learning going on right now. We are not hesitating to step in. We're ahead of the curve. We've been ahead of the curve in terms of our investments and our aggressive moves here, and we're staying there. We're not waiting for anybody to tell us what to do. We've been a leader in this marketplace. We've seen it since SARS, and we've taken that role proudly, and I'm very proud of the framers around the world for what they've done to step up. Up until yesterday, we received nothing but congratulations and thank yous with a few negative narratives out there. To see this turn overnight and to see the efforts that our team is putting in, it's disheartening, but we are standing tall, and we were proud to keep fighting COVID and doing everything we can for the U.S. and other humanitarian needs around the world.
Mike Roman, always appreciate your willingness to talk with us. Thank you for joining us.
Yep, thank you all.
Mike Roman's the chairman and CEO of 3M. Jim, you heard it from him, of course. Listen, this is administration, and you know a number of these people, in particular, that, well, can't always be completely trusted in terms of giving us the facts.
Well, look, I think there's a problem here, and we saw it with Puritan, which is the company that's the swab experts. They make the swab that was a proprietary swab for the nose for the test. We saw it with Medtronic. These are companies that want the call from the president. Puritan wanted the call from just from FEMA, and said, listen, we want you to get all your stuff out of distribution, whatever you can, and just help us. Medtronic has the same problem. They have relations in Italy and Spain. It's a big Puritan's a local U.S. company, but Medtronic, big company that's based here, although it's got it's got an address over in Europe, David, because of the stuff that we used to talk about to make your taxes better. But Mike Rose, he's in a tough spot because he's got manufacturing all over the place. He's an international company that happens to be based in Minnesota. So unless he gets the call in February from the president that just says, okay, listen, we don't care. Everything comes here or X, and that's really not the American way. But if he had done that, then Roman would have pulled everything from the distribution. My dad was a distributor of 3M for 30 years. And if my dad got the call from 3M and said, listen, we need your stuff back, he would not say, well, so what? No, I mean, the distributors worked at the behest of 3M. So there was a way that Mike could have done this better, but there was a way that the administration could have done it better. But then again, it's COVID. Who the hell knew what to do? Who knew what to do?
Really quick, David, Jim.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about medical supplies today, but other countries are starting to limit their exports of rice. We were already headed in sort of a nationalistic trend, but now you're going to start to see countries and companies start to talk about what do we want to keep home.
Well, Benioff did this big airlift. He went over to